how's it going? Tajy and John here once again. We found a, can I say like socialist libertarian or libertarian socialist?
I would probably, I'm libertarian-socialist curious. I'm certainly a socialist, I'm certainly a leftist, but I have some libertarian tendencies, particularly when it comes to peace and when it comes to civil liberties. You know, I don't know how old you guys are.
I'm almost 30.
Okay, I'm 36.
I'm 19.
I came of age during the Bush years. What got me into politics initially were two things. One, I'm gay. And so when you're gay in 2001, your existence is political. You don't have a choice but to be political.
Oh, shit.
But the second thing was the wars. I recognized from a very early age, and it wasn't a very sophisticated analysis because I was 15 when 9/11 happened, and 15-year-olds don't necessarily have sophisticated political analyses. But for me, I could see that going into Afghanistan without any sort of real understanding of the geography, the topography, the culture, the people, was probably not going to end very well. And I just knew that because I grew up in a sort of roughneck Ohio working class town, and I was like, Christ, if somebody came into our town with guns and foreigners invaded, people would be pissed. So, you know, people aren't that different. Doesn't matter where they're in Afghanistan or Ohio, you know, you're going to be pissed.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the second thing was really what got me into politics was Iraq. I never saw a justification for invading that country. I never believed that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And even if there were weapons of mass destruction, I did not believe that we had the right to unilaterally, or with the coalition of the willing, as it was called, invade a sovereign country without a UN mandate. And I saw what happened in Iraq as being my generation's Vietnam. And I understood the injustice of what had happened in Vietnam. Both the injustice of what we did to the Vietnamese people, but also the injustice that we did to our own service members, who we sent over there to die. These were largely working class men because, of course, the wealthy were able to get exemptions. Donald Trump had bone spurs. Mm-hmm. George W. Bush deferred, you know, and was in the Air National Guard, but he didn't actually go over there. You know, so you saw those people, and they contrasted sharply with the John McCains of the world. But, you know, so there were some people who were from these patrician families who enlisted because public service at one point was a noble endeavor for those patrician families. McCain's family, of course, being a storied military family. The two generations before him were both admirals. But by and large, it was working class boys who were being sent over to be slaughtered for rich men. And that bothered me. It bothered me about Vietnam, and it bothered me about Iraq in 2003. And so I opposed the war. And I also didn't like the fact that they had passed the Patriot Act, and I still don't like the Patriot Act. I always say, because I remember after January 6th, there were a lot of people on the left who were saying, we need to put all these MAGA terrorists on the no-fly list. And my reaction was, I'm old enough to remember when the left opposed the no-fly list, because we understood that it could be used to deny American citizens their civil liberties. And those American citizens could be people of color, they could be leftists, they could be conservatives, but the fact of the matter is American citizens have a right to be left alone by their government and to not be spied upon. And if you go back and you watch, like Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, you see, and it's not a perfect film, I wouldn't cite it in a paper by any means, but he does interview people who were really screwed over by the Patriot Act. And so that is what got me into politics. And being here actually this week has reminded me of why I got into politics, and it was to protect our civil liberties.
I feel that. Yeah. I like my remembrance of 9/11 and like all of Afghanistan. I was kind of young to like have my own like unique independent thoughts. But like you were spitting on that. Spit like absolutely. I don't know if there's anything I can add to it. Honestly, I was like, can I add anything? I don't think I can add shit.
I really can't add anything from the time I wasn't born.
Oh yeah, God.
Yeah.
That's the other thing this conference has done. It's made me feel very old.
Yeah. I remember when I was like a freshman in college, I was like, everybody looks like adults. Everyone looks like a peer. Now I look at a freshman in college, I'm like, this looks like a child.
I know.
Like, holy shit.
I know. You don't understand how young you look when you are young.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh. Like,
see, I've had the opposite experience. Every adult's mistaken me for like a 20-year-old since I was like 14.
yeah.
I definitely, I think I've always looked a little bit younger, but that's just because I'm fat, and so it's like automatic Botox right there. Like,
if you told me you're younger than me, I'd believe you.
So what else? You guys got any other questions?
So what attracted you to come cover a libertarian event? What made you decide to come out to Florida, since you don't live here? What made you decide to come out to Florida and go cover the Young Americans event? Why this event?
Well, they invited me. They invited me, and I thought that, it would be an excellent opportunity, one, for my readers. I think it would be something that they would be interested in. It saves me from having to come up with an idea for the weekly column. Like, here you go. But also, I think it's incredibly important, whether you're on the left, I'm going to speak specifically to people on the left. It's incredibly important that you engage with the arguments of the other side. It's incredibly important that you understand where they're coming from. It's incredibly important, so that you know what you're up against and what these people, stand for that you might oppose. But it's also important to know where you can find common ground. And right now, we live in incredibly polarizing times. We live in a time where Americans would rather yell at each other than talk to each other. And in some cases, that's okay. For example, if I saw Nazis, I would yell. But I live in the South. I can't help but to know Republicans. I can't help but to love Republicans. I'm from a very rural area. And so I understand that things are much more complicated than we necessarily always give them credit for, and that someone's vote should not define them. I believe, one of the places where I differ from, I think, a lot of libertarians here is I really do believe that there are structural inequalities in our society. Mm-hmm. I believe in structural racism. I don't support structural racism, but I believe it exists, is what I mean. I believe...
I'm a strong supporter of systemic racism.
Could you imagine? So I believe that there are these structures, but I also believe you have to treat individuals as individuals, and you have to sort of take individuals at face value and operate on an individual interpersonal level in good faith and with the presumption of good faith. And when you do that, you start to understand that just because somebody has a different opinion from you does not mean they have a different goal from you. And then you can start to try and find common ground, and you can work towards where it is that we agree and what could be the best possible solution for all of us. Because whether we like each other or not is immaterial. We have to share this country. Like, we all live here. None of us are going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. So we're going to have to learn to coexist. And me coming here in good faith is a way for me to sort of understand a different perspective and understand my fellow Americans from their own mouths, and listen to them and not the caricatures that the media builds of them. And that's incredibly important, because when the only feedback and the only information you're getting on people who may have different political views than you, or social views than you, or cultural views than you, or views on the latest episode of, Game of Thrones, or I guess that show's not on the air anymore, but whatever it is, you're going to have a one-sided view, and you're not going to be able to view them as human beings and as your fellow Americans. And we like I said, none of us are going anywhere. We're going to have to learn to get along. Personally, I like living in a pluralistic society. I like diversity, and part of that includes ideological diversity. There are some red lines. I'm not going to be palling around with the Klan, but, me and Pat Robertson probably not going to be best friends anytime soon. I think he is still alive. That man's got to be like 100.
700 Club?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Shit. My mom... Oh, okay.
Yeah. But by and large, Americans are good and decent people, and they just, they want to get ahead in life, and they want to put food on the table and provide for their kids. And that's the same whether you're Democrat or Republican, or whether you live in the North or the South or the East or the West, or you're black or you're white, you're gay, you're straight, doesn't matter. at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make it.
Yeah.
Pat Robinson is 92.
I knew. I was like, he's got to be old. But like, look, Pat Robertson and I are not going to be friends anytime soon. But you know, one of the things you come here, like as a gay man, look, I'm sitting here dressed like a Baptist minister's wife. Nobody said shit to me. Nobody cares. And that's something that I think would shock a lot of gay people who assume that all of these folks must be homophobic and transphobic and all of that. And they're not. You know, all you got to do to see a difference is turn on CNN, watch what's happening at CPAC in Texas right now, compare that to what's happening here, and you see, I think, that the people here, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but from what I've seen, I feel like the people I've met here are folks I can do business with. They're folks that I can find common ground with. I'm not going to agree with them on probably most things, but there's a fundamental difference between somebody who is operating from a place of compassion and a place of really wanting to make people's lives better, and people who are operating from a position of fear, a position of hatred, a position of cruelty. And I think that most Americans are operating from a place of compassion.
Yeah. Or at least like they're driven by something.
So you identify as a socialist, right? What made you choose that? I know a lot of people they sort of fall into socialists. Some people identify as communists. Some people identify as like very pro-capitalism. Some people reject all of it entirely and are called like anarcho-primitivists or something. What made you choose socialism specifically? What about that ideology attracted you to it?
Well, first of all, I really enjoy. There are two components to Marxism that I think make a lot of sense. One is the sort of, it's really dialectical materialism is what appeals to me. So dialectics is essentially, you know, you have competing forces. In a capitalist framework, it's the employees and the capital, the employers, the owners. So those who control the means of production and the workers. Well, look, I'm an Appalachian pauper. My family is, you know, we've been in the Appalachian Mountains for generations. My grandparents grew up without electricity, and this was in the 1940s and 1950s, so that's within living memory. We do not control the means of production. And in fact, no one in Appalachia does, and that's really screwed over our region historically because the wealth that has been there in the mountains in the form of coal, everyone knows Appalachia is where coal comes from, or it used to anyway. That wealth, along with that coal, was taken out of the region by the people who came in and bought the land without the folks who owned the land originally really knowing what was under their land. And so those folks got screwed over. And then that wealth got taken up to New England and to the West Coast, and it got spread across the world, but it sure as hell didn't end up in Appalachia. And so that pisses me off. And the moment I put those connections together, I was like, okay, well, there has to be a better system. And the better system is if workers control the means of production. Workers need to be the ones who make the decisions about the companies and the places where they're working, because workers are the ones who have the most at stake, and they are also the ones who, I believe, provide the actual value, because it's labor that provides the value. So if I just, you know, go out, there's a reason why baking a cake is cheaper than going out and buying a cake. You're not paying more for the ingredients. The ingredients
you're paying for the labor.
You're paying for the labor. And so that's the difference. And when you understand that, I think that, first of all, Marxism starts to make a lot more sense, but it also becomes a lot less scary when you understand that it's not necessarily, you know, first of all, there's as many schools of socialism as there are anything else. And I mean, and this is true of a lot of things. I mean, there's as many schools of feminism as you can count, you know, from radical feminism to liberal feminism to eco-feminism. I mean, you know, so, and it's the same with socialism and Marxism. The left is
no conservative feminism.
Well, actually, you know what? Some people would argue there is. Patricia Heaton, best known for playing Deborah Barone on Everybody Loves Raymond, identifies herself as a pro-life feminist and as a conservative feminist.
I think they're big in Texas.
So, I don't know if you can be a conservative and a feminist. I'll leave that for the feminists to argue. I don't think men can be feminists. Oh, I'm sorry.
I feel like there's like a lot of common ground out there between like people that, especially the people here, libertarians, and like I'm more of a social democrat. They are some sort of left that's left to me, I think.
I'm further left than you, yeah.
Yeah, and like I was talking to one person earlier. I think he's like a sophomore in college, and he said his big thing was truth, or what he believed to be true anyway. And I was like, okay, this person can be swayed. Like, if they find out what actual truth is, and according to them, I think their actual opinions can be changed. So like, I didn't realize that. Like, it's different than like I engage on like a lot of online politics. So I'll talk to groypers. I'll talk to people that are really conservative. There are clips of me being online, being called the N-word by like not white supremacists,
panel.
But like, no, like what is Dingo? He's like, I think he believes in like paganism, and he's like a white supremacist, like some sort of whatever that is.
A Nordic pagan or something.
Like, yeah, like Nordic pagans and shit. So like hearing someone that's like, oh, I want truth. I'm like, okay, this person has like, I could easily make common ground with this person. Plus having like a Christian background, like it really allows me to connect with people. Because like we have like believing like moral premises, I believe. But then like I'm like, okay, but my conclusions are different than yours, like politically, and I feel like I can like bring you closer to the side that I'm on.
Yeah, and I think that that's another thing that, you know, libertarianism has in common with actually, you know, Marxism, is that in Marxism, we're a materialist philosophy. You know, we believe that there is an objective truth, that there is a material reality, and that is incredibly important to our politics and to people's lives. What matters is the material world. You know, so we're not an idealist philosophy. And when I say idealist, I don't mean optimistic and sort of flowers and stuff. I mean being of the mind, you know, postmodernism and such. As a Marxist, I don't engage with that very much. I'm interested in what is tangible, what is material, what is reality. And I found, like you, a lot of that here. People just want to get to the truth, you know, define things, figure out what we're talking about, what is actually happening. And that is something I can admire, because I think you probably found this too. Too much of our politics is about feeling and emotion. And that's on the left and the right.
Definitely. Yeah. I know that there are certain things on the left that like are super emotionally based. And on the right too. Like a lot of people on the right, like not necessarily here, but like CPAC, for example, is like every queer person's a pedophile, groomer, child eating, child rapist, you know?
Me walking with black pants on. Hey, Antifa. Like getting shouted at, called Antifa, the conservative rapper identifying you as an Antifa member.
Yeah, I got called Mr. Antifa, but I do a lot of underground stuff here, and I got called Mr. Antifa. I'm not Antifa at all. But like, and people on the left are like kill all landlords. Not people on the that's like extremists on the left, you know?
Yeah.
Kill all landlords. China's right about everything. It's like,
I don't know how any leftist, you know, could look at the CCP and say, yes, I want more of that, please, here. Like, no, that's, you know, because, and here's the thing too, here's another thing about being a libertarian or about the libertarian movement is like, it's inherently anti-authoritarian. And I am inherently anti-authoritarian. Just leave me alone. That's kind of my feeling, you know, like, if we're going to have a government, I think that it should provide for some basic needs. You know, and I believe that in order to have true liberty, you do have to be able to, like, leave your job without losing your health care. Like, I don't know that, like, you can necessarily say that you have liberty when, you know, your very life is tied to whether or not you can keep your job. And indeed, a lot of employers don't even offer health insurance. And so, you know, and I probably disagree with the libertarians that are here about how to get to that point. But we don't disagree that we need to get to that point. I don't think. I think most of the people I've met here really understand that healthcare is screwed up in this country. That crony capitalism and corporatism isn't working. This isn't the world they want. It's not the world I want. So, I mean, it might be the world that Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump wants. I don't know. I don't know either of them personally. I know that the one time I criticized something Nancy Pelosi did, she unfollowed me on Twitter. But, you know, and yeah, okay, that's a little petty, but I'm going to be a little petty about that, Nancy. Yeah, I saw that. But this isn't the world I want, and it's not the world they want. And we're the ones, I'm only 36, you're only 30. The students who are attending this are college students. We're the ones who are going to be experiencing and living in this world the longest, knock on wood, May we all live long and happy lives. But, so we have to figure out a way, and I think that we can find common ground to move forward on. And it's been a really positive experience being here. And I really want to drive that home. Like, I want people to understand that there are folks out there on the right who we can work with that aren't raging bigots. They don't necessarily get the media attention, and they aren't necessarily the ones controlling the direction of the Republican Party right now. But God, the world would be a better place if they were.
I think that's a strong Republican Party Nancy wanted.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like, let's be completely honest here. We are better off if we do not have a one-party state.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want unlimited democratic control. Now, in an ideal world, we might have different, socialist political parties, competing for one another.
Would you be in favor of something like Canada's model, or I guess the UK to a lesser extent? They don't really have a viable third party either. But when it comes to like Canada, like the NDP, the Liberal Party, the Conservative Party, I think it's the Christian Families Party as well. Like all of them have like a viable chance of gaining seats. All of them have some level of like regional pull within their.
Absolutely. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, and she was absolutely right, and she got a lot of flack for it from, I think, the mainstream Democratic Party and the establishment. But what she was doing was making a very astute political observation, which is that in a functioning democracy, and in any other country in the world, she and Joe Biden, and I'm going to go and extend that to me and Joe Biden, would not be in the same political party. My political views are very different than Joe Biden's political views. The problem we have with a two-party system is that we only have a binary choice. And so it's like, all right, pick the one closest to your views. That's why I've come to the conclusion, and I didn't always think this way. I didn't, and I'm ashamed of that. But I've come to the conclusion that judging somebody for voting for Donald Trump, and that's the only thing you know about them is that they're a Trump voter, and then saying, well, you must be homophobic and sexist and racist and blah, 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 is not necessarily fair. And you know why it's not fair? Because they had two choices. That's it.
Well, okay, so on the two choices thing, do you think you only have two choices, or that's the mindset that prevents there from being a viable third choice?
Materially, there's only like two choices.
Yeah.
If I voted for Ron Paul during 2012, then that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
Yeah, but don't you think that mindset is heavily ingrained within like American culture? There's no way a third-party candidate could ever win. There's no way a third-party candidate can gain a mass amount of support. But if you look at, I think it was the 2000 election, what was his name? God, I can remember his name. Ross. Thank you.
Not Ross Perot. Ross Perot was in 92 and 96. Ralph Nader was in 2000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Ralph Nader didn't do terribly for a third-party candidate, and you were. I was thinking of the person you mentioned. Yeah, Ross Perot.
That was before my time. I think he did something really stupid. I think he dropped out temporarily for his daughter's wedding or some shit like that.
Yeah, Ross Perot came and went in 92, and then by 96 his momentum had petered out. I'm too young to really remember much of the 92 election, but I do remember my dad actually liked Ross Perot.
From what I understand, he was I think he was fairly socially liberal and a bit of an economic conservative in some areas.
I'm not
and I remember
familiar with his politics.
I don't remember what election it was, but I remember the party that he created or the party that he was running for put Trump up in the late 90s as well.
Yeah, they did. So Trump did briefly run as a Reform Party. Yeah. Was he the nominee or was he seeking the nomination?
He was seeking the nomination. He dropped out in
99, and then he dropped out.
Funny enough, he had a lot of positions in that election that he was supporting. That if you heard him talk about now, he would be like, "That's socialism. That's evil."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into the history of Donald Trump, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. Trump is a grifter, and if you look at his Look at his life before The Apprentice, is what I tell people. Everything you need to know about Donald Trump, you can learn from how he ran his businesses. And it was not very nice or effective. He bankrupted a lot of crap. And he hired, illegal Polish laborers and then like refused to pay them. Like, there's a great book by I think his name is C.J. Cox, and it's called The Making of Donald Trump. He is not a political reporter. He is an economic and tax reporter, and he covered Trump as a businessman in New York. And in 2015, 2016, he started shopping a book, and it ended up having to be written very, very quickly because no one wanted to publish it because all the publishers were like, Donald Trump's not going to win the nomination. And then when it became clear that like he's not going anywhere, they wanted this guy to write this book real fast. But it's an eye-opening book. It's a very interesting book about the trajectory of the man who became the 45th president, and everything you needed to know about him, he told you in the 1980s.
Damn.
Like, he hasn't changed. He's the same person he always was, and that's a grifter.
That's the
I'm not an ever Trumper. I just think he's the worst person the Republican Party could put up. I mean, he did occasionally he would do something right, but a broke clock is right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there was something. I mean, I think that
it's like how they did the delegates in the Republican Party, right? It's like winner take all versus like Democrats do it in a different type of way.
That's the problem with our electoral system, I think. So
Yes.
I ranked choice vote in person.
Ranked choice.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting one. This is the final question I have, and if you have any more, go ahead after me. But what is your opinion on the abolishment of the Electoral College? Do you think that could benefit maybe making a viable third party?
Oh, definitely.
Or do you think that's something that we should do, shouldn't do? Is there a case that you could make for or against it?
The Senate exists to protect the rights of the states, and I have been a big proponent of abolishing the Senate. I'm starting to change my mind on that because I do think that in a nation as geographically large as ours, that you do need to protect minority rights. But the Electoral College, which I think a lot of people would argue does the same thing, I think you could abolish and not have to worry so much about the regional impact of what that is. And I think it's important that we abolish it and that the president is elected by popular vote. And I'll tell you why. There is only one office in this nation that every American votes on, and that is the president. Not every American votes for the Senate because we have 50 states. And so the people I'm voting for in Tennessee are not the same people that you all are voting for in Florida or that you're voting for in Wyoming. And so the president is the only office that every American has a say in. And so should we really dilute the voice of the American people with this antiquated system that was designed because we were not trusted to be smart enough to pick our own president? You know, this is really like sort of a backstop for the ignorant masses who the founder